North Korea, with its secretive and enigmatic political system, has always been a hot topic in international discussions. Recently, its actions, from testing ballistic missiles to building alliances with major countries like Russia and China, are actively reshaping the global geopolitical landscape. What is really happening behind North Korea's closed doors? And how might these events impact the world? To gain a comprehensive perspective, we need to dive into North Korea's complex history, its alliances, and strategic moves. After World War II, the Korean peninsula was divided along the 38th parallel, marking the separation between North and South Korea. While the North was backed by the Soviet Union and adopted a socialist regime, the South became a capitalist country under U.S. influence. This marked the beginning of a prolonged standoff between the two regions, defined by completely opposing ideologies. In 1948, with Soviet support, leader Kim Il-sung took control in the North and established the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. From there, Kim introduced Juche, a principle of self-reliance, which to this day remains the core foundation of North Korea's political, economic, and military decisions. Kim Il-sung enacted sweeping reforms aimed at building a strong socialist state that would be independent of any other nation. Nationalizing industries was a key step, enabling North Korea to control all essential economic sectors, while land redistribution aimed to promote social equality. Juche, more than just an ideology, became a guiding principle that enabled North Korea to maintain independence in an unstable global environment. It empowered North Korea to resist outside influence, reject aid from the West, and choose a path of self-sufficiency. This explains why, despite decades of isolation, North Korea has maintained resilience and even developed in unique ways. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 was a turning point, not only for the peninsula, but also in the Cold War struggle among superpowers. North Korea's assault on the South, aimed at unifying the peninsula under communism, sparked a fierce counterattack led by the U.S. through the United Nations. The war ended with an armistice in 1953, establishing a military border at the 38th parallel, but without any formal peace treaty. This effectively means that, in theory, the two Koreas are still at war. From that point forward, Pyongyang has viewed the U.S. as its greatest adversary, a nation that threatens its existence and sovereignty. During the 1950s and 1960s, North Korea's relationship with key allies, the Soviet Union and China, deepened, though Pyongyang maintained a policy of non-dependence. The Soviet Union provided military aid and technical support, while China also stood by to protect North Korean interests. However, relations with China were not always smooth. In the 1960s, China's Cultural Revolution introduced ideological conflicts with North Korea. While China supported global revolution, North Korea adhered firmly to its self-reliance policy, avoiding dependence on any nation, including its two socialist superpower allies. A major shift in North Korea's foreign and military policy came with its nuclear program. Starting in the 1960s, North Korea invested in nuclear energy to create a strategic advantage in international negotiations. The nuclear program not only serves as a national defense against threats, but also as leverage over the international community. Especially after the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991, North Korea lost one of its primary economic supporters and fell into a severe crisis. The 1990s were marked by hardship and famine, leading to millions of deaths. Yet even during this time, Pyongyang was determined to advance its nuclear program to secure its bargaining position on the global stage. Relations between North Korea and the U.S. have always been complex, with periods of tension punctuated by rare diplomatic efforts. In the early 2000s, President George W. Bush labeled North Korea as part of the axis of evil, further fueling Pyongyang's determination to develop nuclear weapons. Under Kim Jong-un's leadership, North Korea conducted numerous missile tests and intensified its nuclear program. Although there were summit meetings between Kim and former U.S. President Donald Trump in 2018 and 2019, negotiations on denuclearization did not yield substantive progress. While the world hopes for a peaceful resolution, North Korea continues to strengthen its military capabilities to ensure it cannot be easily threatened or interfered with. Today, amidst rising tensions with the West, North Korea has turned back to its strategic allies, China and Russia. With China, the relationship is not only based on shared socialist ideals, but also on China's need to maintain a stable buffer zone in light of the U.S. military presence in South Korea. Although China does not support North Korea's nuclear program, it continues to provide economic and political backing to Pyongyang. With Russia, the relationship is somewhat different, as both nations share an opposition to U.S. dominance. Amid Russia's ongoing tensions with the West over the Ukraine conflict, Moscow has moved closer to Pyongyang, creating an informal alliance among sanctioned nations. This past October, North Korea once again launched a ballistic missile toward the Sea of Japan, and this was no ordinary missile test. Japanese and South Korean officials reported that the missile reached an altitude of 7,000 kilometers, a new record, marking a significant technological leap for North Korea. The increasing frequency of North Korea's missile tests has sparked concern among neighboring countries, compelling South Korea and Japan to bolster their defenses. For international observers, this is a sign that Pyongyang remains determined to pursue its military ambitions and is prepared to resist external pressures. There are intelligence reports suggesting that North Korean troops may be supporting Russia in the Ukraine conflict, though this has not been officially confirmed. South Korean reports indicate that as many as 3,000 North Korean troops might be stationed in Russia, particularly in military zones, potentially for combat roles in Ukraine. If true, North Korea's involvement would not only strengthen its ties with Russia, but also add a new layer of complexity to the geopolitical landscape. Pyongyang's closer alignment with Moscow amid Russia's isolation could open up new risks and heighten tensions in East Asia. Looking back, North Korea's journey since World War II has been one of persistence and a drive for autonomy, yet also one of bold decisions. In today's international context, North Korea is playing a dangerous game with the superpowers, using its nuclear and military capabilities to protect its interests while seeking support from allies who share its anti-Western agenda. These moves affect not only East Asia's security situation, but also have potential global ramifications. North Korea, small in size but growing in military capability, remains a factor that any superpower must take seriously. We hope that through this video, you've gained a deeper and more comprehensive understanding of the complex dynamics surrounding North Korea and its influence on the global geopolitical landscape. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated with more engaging and insightful international analyses. Your support motivates us to keep delivering high-quality, informative content.